Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's edition of the Geeking Out podcast. I am the Athletic Geek, and my guest this week is a real jack of all trades in all different cultures. But the one we're going to primarily focus on today is his pro wrestling career. It is Stride superstar, now referee, Duke Randall. Duke, how you doing today?
Doing all right, brother. Pleasure to be on. It's an honor.
I think it's the first time anybody's ever been honored to be on this show, but I appreciate the kind words. But my first question to you is the standard question: were you a wrestling fan growing up?
Big wrestling fan, and actually, wrestling is actually in my blood. Actually, my grandfather was actually a catch as catch can wrestler in the carnivals back in the 50s and 60s. And my mother was actually helped as a promoter whenever the Paphos came to town with ICW back in Cape Girardeau. My mom actually dated one of the wrestlers, the Jobbers, Texas Tony Falk, back in the 80s. And
Wow.
wrestling has just been in my blood. Combat sports has been in my blood. My grandfather was a wrestler in the carnival days. My mom was I guess you could call it, a promoter with the Paphos whenever they would come to town, and my great grandfather was a boxer in the Golden Glove. So, combat sports is in my blood.
Okay, it's very interesting you say that. Did you ever, really get to know your grandfather? Did you hear any stories about, his days in the carnivals and what that was like for him?
Oh
You know,
yeah, I mean, my grandfather just lives right down the road from me, and he taught me how to wrestle and everything with the technical side. And not only that, growing up on a cattle farm with about 40 head of Black Angus, you had to get in there and be pretty tough. And actually, my first wrestling matches I ever had was wrestling 400-pound steers. And so, you really learn how to cinch up on a hold, and especially whenever you're dealing with an animal, and a person is completely different. But, you get a
right.
feel of it, how you got to be, on point, focused, and not screw up.
Um, you have any stories that you remember your grandpa telling us about the days you could share with us?
Yeah, he told me one time that this was back, I think it was back in 56, 57. He was wrestling in a carnival local. I can't remember where he said. And this guy got in the room, this big corn-fed country boy with overalls got in the ring, and he said, "I'll wrestle him." And him and my granddad locked up. And my grandfather is 6'2", and at the time he weighed 250 pounds, and that's no slouch. This guy was at least 6'6" and weighed about 300, pushing 3 bills. They locked up and they didn't move literally for like a minute and a half to 2 minutes, and then they ended up having to call a match because nobody could move each other.
Huh. Well, there you go. um, Switching gears. So you mentioned your your mother or your grandmother was the promoter.
Mother.
Mother. Your mother was a promoter with the Paphos.
Yeah, she would go whenever the Paphos would come to town. She would sell tickets, run the concession stand, run the merch tables, set up the ring, tear down the ring, be prop handler in the back, help with wardrobe, and she pretty much did it all other than actually wrestle and everything.
Do you have any good stories about working with, Angelo, Lanny, or Randy?
She knew Leap and Lanny, and she knew Randy. They were very, very close, and especially with Andre the Giant, my mom was extremely close. Whenever Andre would come to town, he made himself my mother's personal bodyguard.
Really?
There was one time she told me, somebody, I think it was Piper or Sheik, were sitting at the bar, and my mom was sitting there, and they were giving my mom all kinds of crap. And here came Andre lumbering in, and she said he put his hand on the top of their head, picked them up, and spun them around on their bar stool and said, "You leave Marlene alone. You leave her alone, or I hurt you."
Damn.
Yeah, she knew all of them. She knew the Sheik. She knew Roddy. She knew Flair. She knew Ricky Steamboat, Dusty Rhodes, Andre, Nikolai Volkov, Big Boss Man, Mr. Perfect, Macho Man, and Leaping Lanny Poffo. She knew all of them, and she has so many stories. She actually knew the uh, Stonehand Ronnie Garvin back whenever he was the one man gang,
Right, right.
and she's got 8x10s up on in a photo album that she keeps put away. But she, needless to say, she was living the Mark's dream.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Well, how'd she get involved in promoting? Like what? Like especially back in the older days, that had to be very difficult to get involved in that. Nowadays, you just go through enough red tape and have the money. You could probably. And I'm not. Then I've had a lot of promoters on this show. I'm not saying it's an easy process, but if you got the funds and you're willing to sit through the headache of doing it, you can start your own. Just be ready for the headache. But I imagine it
Oh
had to be significantly more difficult back in the 70s and 80s.
well, how she got into it was she went to a show down in Cape Girardeau with some girlfriends, and she caught the eye of this wrestler named Texas Tony Falk, and they started dating. They dated for like 2.5, 3 years, I think she said, and that's how she got in the back and got the inner workings of kayfabe back then, and that's how she got into working with the Poffos.
Okay. So she would just promote the Cape Girardeau shows. Would she promote?
Yes, yes,
Okay, I didn't know she'd promote some of the other shows at the K because I know the ICW kind of ran the Southern Illinois, Southeast Missouri, Kentucky area quite frequently. But she was but Cape was her town.
yeah.
Awesome. So wrestling's in your blood. So you're wanting to know. I'm guessing you're an aspiring wrestler from day one, right? Like, or are you thinking something else instead of wrestling at first?
Well, 100%. I mean, I from the time I was back, I'll just start at the beginning. I first discovered WWE, and it wasn't in the early 2000s. It was 2009 whenever SmackDown came to my network TV, Channel 49, and it was on every Friday nights from 7 till 9. From 7 till 9, I was glued to that television. And it was back whenever I first got into it. It was back whenever Jeff Hardy was getting geared up to win the WWE title. Undertaker and Big Show was having their feud, where Undertaker was terrorizing Vicky Guerrero. All that good stuff. CM Punk was still working in ECW and just now getting ready to come over to SmackDown. So, but back then, that was back. I was in about the sixth grade, I want to say it was, but I remember faintly. Um, it was in one of the earlier days. I think it was Booker T was working Abyss in TNA, and that was way before I discovered WWE. But it was just flipping through the channels and everything, and I would beg and plead. I'm like, "Can we watch wrestling?" No, because you'll go and try to do something like that, and you'll hurt somebody. Yeah, but I mean, whenever me and my brother we discovered, WWE, we'd watch it together. Um, we actually started buying the video games and everything, and we created our own characters on there, like any wrestling fan does. And we actually just started, no kidding, we started our own little quote unquote promotion in my grandparents' basement, and it was called Dungeon Championship Wrestling. And it was, and back then, whenever we did that, I was known as the KO specialist, the Hard Rock, and
Okay.
my brother was the natural Jesse James, and it was just us and a bunch of our friends. There was two women wrestlers, Blackthorn and Brittany Bombshell. There was the Ray brothers, Ray's Domination and the Enigma. There was our two friends from Wisconsin that moved down, and we called them the Canadian Destroyers.
Okay. Wow. So you got quite the list of characters. Was this like just done on the video games, or was this like kind of
No, this was real
Okay.
life.
Okay. Okay.
Us
Okay. Okay.
taking This was us. We didn't even have padding or a mattress.
Oh no.
We had foam rubber and the little half-inch thick pieces of foam that you put underneath carpets on floors, and a piece of carpet that was 10 by 10, and we were bumping on that and hitting it on laminate flooring that was underneath of it.
Jeez.
We
But
didn't have a top rope. We had a couch. We didn't
oh
have an
god.
announce table. We didn't have an announce table. We had a piano bench. And we didn't have kendo sticks. We had PVC pipe, and we didn't have chairs. We had cookie sheets and tote lids.
I mean, okay. So how old were you when you were doing your your dungeon wrestling down there?
Uh, oh, we was probably from about the time we was 12 until we were about maybe six. I was 16. It ran from the time I was 12 till we were 16, and then all of us started. Some of us graduated high school and moved away, and some of us just got busy with work, and we all couldn't get together and hang out anymore.
Gotcha. Gotcha. So when you're doing these sort of shows, was there any like temper flares, or was there any like issues that would come about? You know, because even if you're good friends, doing something like this, eventually somebody's gonna get tired of losing, and somebody might want to be the champion one day. Did you ever have any spats during the matches over silly stuff like that?
Oh yeah, I remember one time it was me and my brother. Um, we were wrestling as the Mean Street Posse against the Ray Brothers, and next thing you know, the tag team match turns into a fatal four way, and next thing you know, everybody's shooting on each other.
Jeez. So who won the match?
I did. Pedigree into a stunner.
Damn, I want to see that. I want to somebody who's listening to this like do a pedigree into a stunner during a match. I will. You'll pop me at least. I can't speak for everybody else, but you'll pop me. Um. Okay, so everybody's growing up. Everybody's kind of going their separate ways. You know, dungeon wrestling's going by the wayside. When do you discover wrestling, like independent wrestling, in your area, and kind of then start making your way to becoming a pro wrestler?
2009. It was August 15th, I believe. No, August 27th of 2009 at Rent One Park in my hometown of Marion, Illinois, and All American Pro Wrestling was there. And I remember the main event. It was Badass Billy Gunn against Kevin Thorne.
I was there. Yes,
That was the main event. You remember that day? It was freaking raining
it
that day, and they were
rained.
still out there.
Yep, it rained. It rained. It rained so bad that we ran to my friend's car to just kind of seek shelter from the rain, and it was so bad that our baseball tickets were like warped, and we're like, I guess we can't go back in.
I remember me and my brother, we were on the west side of the ring over by where the bar is, and we were right in the front row, and we were doing DX and all kinds of stuff. My brother was up on my shoulders. We were doing the DX uh, motion with our hands and all that stuff whenever Billy Gunn came out there, because Billy Gunn come out there, hit the sweet chin music into the Famouser on Kevin Thorne that night. But the one, I didn't even know who they were. I didn't know who anybody was, but the one person that caught my eye that made me want to be a professional wrestler, who I considered to be my god of professional wrestling, was Mr. Electricity himself, Edmund Livewire McGuire, and he worked Carnage that night.
Yes.
And not only that, Curly was there too. Heath Hatton wasn't wrestling yet. I don't even think he had debuted yet, but I think whenever I talked to Heath, he said that it was a couple months before he debuted that they had that show. But Curly was there. I was just entertained by Curly with his antics and his nyuk nyuk and his shtick. But the one person that caught my eye was Edmund Livewire McGuire, and I was hooked from that time on. I watched wrestling religiously. I learned what I could. I studied up on history of professional wrestling. I found Lou Thez, Vern Gagne, Haystack Calhoun, Buddy Rogers, Yukon Eric, Killer Kowalski, Antonino, Argentina Rocca. I started studying all of those guys, um, all the way up into the 80s, and I kind of hovered right there. And I watched those guys, and cut to 10 years later in 2019, I just made a post on Facebook and I said, is there any pro wrestling going on in Southern Illinois? And a friend of mine from Harrisburg posted a flyer promotion for Stride. And I'm like, Mom, you want to go? And I said, we haven't been to a wrestling show in over 10 years. She said, sure, we'll go. And that night I sat front row, and it was November 5th of 2019. And I can remember the card that night as good as it happened last night. And it was Red Daniels was the champ in the main event. Gaylord Stevens made his return, tripped up Daniels whenever Daniels went for the body slam. Axe did the dirty pin, became the new champion. Edmund Livewire McGuire made his return that night. And I marked out. I was so excited. So I went and I was talking at intermission, and I told him Kevin Huntsberger was one of the first people I talked to that night. And then I talked to Heath Hatton, and I talked to Red Daniels, and I said, I've always wanted to be a professional wrestler. And they said, well, we got a school here. We meet every Tuesday and Thursday at 6 o'clock. Come on out and try it out. And it was signed, sealed, and delivered. And I came to training the next Tuesday.
Hmm. So, how was it a hard transition to go from what you were doing, um, which I'm not making fun of any. I mean, because I did it too. We've all been there. But when you actually try and become a wrestler, you realize everything you were doing in the basement, in the backyard, and the trampoline was really just screwing around. Was it hard to kind of get that out of your head and try and focus on, okay, this is an actual ring. These are ropes I'm gonna be running. These are actual bumps. Was that hard for you? Was that difficult? Was that a shock? Take me through your training.
Well, yeah, I mean, it kind of was. I mean, of course, I'm a fast learner, but I would say the hardest thing that it took me was to learn was how to bump.
Okay.
Because I'm not kidding, first time I went and I took a bump, I almost knocked myself out. And I must have bounced my head off the canvas about two or three times before Red Daniel says, okay, no more bumping tonight. We don't need you getting concussed. And then whenever I started really getting a feel of it and everything, I was watching videos on how to bump and how to throw your feet up. And because I used to work construction at the time whenever I was still training, and I I worked at Truebill, and I was the garage foreman there. So anytime I had any free time, I'd go to my boss and I said, "Hey, can I bump?" And they said, "Yeah, sure." And we had a stack of plywood out there in the shop, and it wasn't merciless at all. It was unforgiving, but I learned how to bump on a stack of plywood on a concrete floor. Of course, that's how we used to do it in the uh, dungeon whenever we were wrestling in my grandparents' basement. It was laminate flooring on top of concrete, so I was used to the pain and everything, and that helped me learn how to bump. And cut to whenever I first started really getting into it, it looked like a tree falling down. Is exactly what it looked like. And then I focused on bumping just on my own, on my mattress, on my bed, on the floor, out in the yard. Anytime I could, I would bump at random, throw my legs out and bump. And I came in the next week and I was bumping like I'd been bumping all my life. It's so that was the hardest part, was learning how to bump. I could do all the technical stuff. Learning how to do arm ringers, headlocks was easy because of whenever I was growing up and everything. I used to do bullfighting and calf roping and everything, and you have to go and wrestle those things to the ground, put them in a headlock. So that just came naturally to me. But learning how to work arms, work legs, work the body, that was the hardest part.
Um, I have some folks that aren't really wrestling fans, and they maybe would feel like that's the easiest part of learning it is working the body parts. To a non wrestling fan, how would you explain how that can be difficult?
Well, it's completely new. I mean, you are in a completely different world. You're going from someone sitting in the front row that's a mark to being an actual worker. You got to learn how to work. You got to know how to work safe. You got to know how to work snug, light. You got to be very careful because you got to be not only conscious of what you're doing, keeping yourself safe, but you got to keep the other guy that's across the ring from you safe as well. You don't want walking out with broken limbs and broken backs, concussions, getting knocked out. You know, and it's a lot of psychology. I mean, my first time I got into an actual ring in front of the crowd, it was at the AAPW Resurrection show at Black Diamond, and I was in the Curly Shuffle Battle Royal, and I watched back that match compared to where I was at before I had to retire. It was god awful. I mean, it was horrible. I'm like, I can't even watch it anymore because it literally makes me physically want to throw up. It's a learning experience. I mean, I really, after that, I didn't wrestle in a show. I worked as a referee um, up until May or August of last year during COVID, and whenever I wrestled against Axe for the heavyweight title. But honestly, the best thing to do for anybody, I would say, is start off being a referee because you get to learn how to work the crowd. You get to watch the guys and the girls work up close and personal in the ring. You're able to watch it, take notes in your head, and not only that, it's the best seat in the house.
um, so okay, you mentioned your debut in the Curly Shuffle Battle Royal. You mentioned now you look back on that match and you can't watch it because you feel like you did a poor job in the match. But
Oh God, it was for the lack of the better term, the drizzling shits.
but there's got to be a lot of emotion and a lot of excitement and a lot of different things run through your head, even in a battle royal. But as you're getting out there to wrestle your first match, you mentioned AAPW being a big part of your wrestling fandom, and this is the AAPW reunion show. What are you thinking? Is like here you are making your debut essentially in kind of the what could kind of be considered the last hurrah for AAPW.
I was honored because we got there at about 1 o'clock and we set up the ring, and then everybody started coming in. We all went in the back and put our gear on and everything. And then we came out, and I mean, there's so many stories there. I mean, I was in there with people that I watched growing up, and I didn't even recognize it until I saw like certain tattoos that they had. Like Paul Rose was there for like 3 hours, and I was sitting there talking to him for like 2.5 hours, and I didn't even know it was him until we were in the locker room and he was putting his singlet on. And I looked over and I saw the Playboy tattoo, and I'm like, "Oh shit, you're Paul Rose." He goes, "Yep."
Paul's an awesome dude.
He is. I mean, I joke with him all the time, and I keep telling him I want that singlet.
Um, so okay, your opinion, you were bad. What did you feel about that match that you thought was not up to standard that um where do that you eventually saw yourself improve on later on down the road?
Oh, my ring psychology.
Okay.
I mean, because I remember I got in there right away. Because I remember I was in there for 2 minutes on the dot, and I was only supposed to be in there for 30 seconds. And I told a couple people, I'm like, you get a chance, come throw me out. That didn't go that way, because next thing you know, all three of those people are on the other side of the ring. And I wasn't even supposed to be working heel. I wasn't supposed to be working face. I was just supposed to be out there and job. And I'm like, well, I'm not going to stand here in the corner and look like some bum they pulled off the street, which I basically was. But that's beside. I only had about a month of training, and so um, Kevin McCleary, I called him Crash, grabbed me and threw me in the corner and started working me. And then he started working me, and I come over through a forearm, and I just started stone cold mud hole stomping him in the corner. And I might have tagged him a couple times. And he's rolling out, and then here comes Willpower, and he's throwing all kinds of gut shots and everything. And I,
That's Willpower, the stride wrestler, not the IndyCar driver, right?
right. But, and he came in and he's working me, and I'm like, I'm standing in the corner after he's throwing all those shots, and I'm selling my ass off to him. And I just told him, I said, chop me. He goes, what? And I said, chop me. And he goes, and he just, okay. And he just chopped me, and I went down. And then here come Carrie Gold. Carrie Gold is working me in the corner, and then she's choking me out with her foot. And then I had this one spot, and I'm like, I'm going to do it right now. She came out, and I forgot to sell that she was actually choking me, and I started hangmanning Willpower over the top rope with a bandana I had around my neck. And then come closing moment, here came this one kid named Casey Brinkmeyer. We called him Bones. And he came in and he jabbed me in the chin, and it was light enough, but I still felt it. And so he came up, started working me in the corner, and started chopping me. Well, then he missed on the third chop, and he came back around. He backhanded me in the mouth. Well, about that point, I'm tasting blood. And I'm getting very, very mad. I reached out, and that's the thing. Whenever I was still wrestling and everything, I was a dirty heel, about as dirty as they could get. I would go and I would pull their hair, pull them around by the beard. I'd grab their nose, drag them around by the ear. I'd bite them. I was every bit as heelish as I could be. I reached out and I grabbed him by the ears and I threw him in the corner. And I went and I checked him one time light to make sure he was there. And then the second time I just hauled off and I just freaking ham hocked him with a forearm. And I told him, I said, you backhand me in the mouth again, I'm going to stomp your ass. And so, about that time, here came beautiful Brian Richards. And he came up.
Love that guy. I want to put that up for the record, though.
And here's the cool thing. Brian Richards was my first rival and opponent in Stride at that Battle Royal, and he was my last opponent in my last match. How awesome is that?
That is awesome. Other than the fact that you had to retire, that's awesome.
Yeah, and I was out and I was working security for the rest of the night. And, I missed the women's match. I missed B-Rad and Willpower. I was able to watch the Survivor Series style match between Team AAPW and Team Stride. Um, I was able to watch the six-man tag between Spade, Hatton, and Huntsberger against the Kings of Destiny, Roger Mathis, Chris Hargis, and Savion Ayers. And I still talk about it to this day. The finish of that match with the trifecta, as I call it: power bomb, super kick, spear. You were there that night, correct?
Yes.
That you remember that crowd popped like a mother effer.
Right. Yeah.
And I was over in the corner in a cowboy hat, screaming and jumping up and down. And I've learned so much then, but it's still the fact that It does. It's even if we, with workers, we're still fans. We still pop. We'll do we do things in the ring trying to get each other to pop, and it it was sort of to cap off AAPW Resurrection. It was a dream come true. I worked hard for 10 years, learning all I could about professional wrestling to get to that point. The man that started it for me for wrestling, that inspired me to become a professional wrestler, was Edmund Livewire McGuire. And then fast forward to 10 years later almost, and I'm on the same card as my hero. I was the opening, and he was the close.
That's awesome.
Talk about euphoric.
Right. Yeah, it was a really special night. It really brought yeah, it really brought the closure that AAPW never had. You know.
Right. I've heard um, Heath Hatton, Kevin Huntsberger, Sean Chambers, and Ed talk about it all the time. I actually saw Sean Chambers here a couple months ago, of all places, in Walmart, and talked for a little bit and everything. And he says the same thing. He said, that was the storybook ending
Right.
for AEPW. They went out on a high note.
Yeah. It took them 7 years, but they finally got the ending they deserved.
Exactly.
Okay, so your debut and your debut is in essentially the last AAPW show. You're progressing with your training and improving from there. You mentioned that you know you had some rivalries with the likes of beautiful Brian Richards. Well, tell us a little bit more about your stuff with Brian Richards.
Well, I mean, there was always, that competitive edge and everything. And, of course, back whenever I was first starting to train and everything is kind of where it started. And we lock up in the ring. He takes me into an arm wringer and then he starts biting me in the hand. So, being training to be a heel, I just reach around and punch him in the balls, straight up. And we'd had practice matches and everything. I love Brian Richards to death. He's my good friend and everything, and we uh, talk about once a week if we're able to. And him and a mutual acquaintance of ours, Bud Galloway, was
Yes.
actually instrumental in helping me um, develop my character, the old school outlaw Duke Randall. And Duke Randall as a character made his appearance at Stridiversary 2020, and the name came out of the blue. I went and I was just because I'm a real cowboy. I am a cattle rancher, so I've always been living around the cowboy lifestyle. Red Daniels said to me, we could outfit you with a cowboy gimmick, and I'm like, okay. And me and my sister and my best friend, we sat around the kitchen table one night and we just brainstormed all night. And um, my best friend said, well, who's two of your favorite cowboys? And I said, the Duke, John Wayne, and Josh Randall from Wanted Dead or Alive. The bounty hunter is played by Steve McQueen. And then I started mulling that around in my head, coming up with names. I was thinking John McQueen or Steve Wayne, and then I'm like, Duke Randall. Duke Randall, that actually sounds pretty good. Duke Randall was born on in March of 2020 at Stridiversary.
Awesome. So another match you mentioned you had was you're the old school outlaw, but you had a heavyweight title match against the old school warrior, Axe Allwork. Tell us about working Axe and what Axe is like. I'm he's kind of like the dream guest I have yet to get, but
Well,
what's Axe like?
well, I will just say this, and this is referring back to your question earlier about with my first match with my nerves. Axe was the first person to really talk to me in the locker room. And I've posted on Facebook because I was a ball of nerves. And I said, anybody that's in the business have any advice for somebody that's dealing with nerves before their debut? He goes, go out there and have fun. Just don't F up. Of course, he didn't say F,
Right.
but you know, he was the one that pushed me to actually go with the old school uh, character, and because he loves old school wrestling and everything, and he said, because I used to come out in a robe with a towel and everything like Luthez used to, um, and he dug it and everything, and a lot of people did. So I rolled with it. So, Axe, if you ever listen to this, thank you for giving me your blessing on using the old school part. um, so working Axe is I was ball of nerves because I used to work with Heath Hatton at a job one time. We worked together for a while, and we're just riding around in the truck going to another place, and he goes, "I think I'm going to have you work Axe for our Resurgence show for the title." I'm like, "Wait, what?" He goes, "Yeah, yeah, you're going to work Axe," and I'm like, "Tyler, Heath, I was just joking." And I'm like, I'm starting to freak out and everything because I had refereed every show up until Resurgence. I hadn't hardly wrestled a match. I wasn't featured on any shows. I hadn't been in front of a crowd outside of being a referee. And I'm like, oh God, what are we going to do? So I called Axe up on the phone, and I'm like, well, looks like you and me are working. He said, yeah, that's what Heath said. And I said, well, what do you want to do? And I told him, I said, I've never took a pile driver before, and I'm scared to death of it because if you do it wrong, it's the most dangerous move in wrestling. And of course, anything that results in you landing on your head is risky.
Right.
And I just said, well, what do you want to do? He goes, I told him, I said, I can't take the pile driver because I've never taken one and I am not comfortable taking it. He goes, well, I'm not going to make you take it. Um, if you've never taken it and you're not comfortable, I won't make you take it. I told him, I said, well, you could either, I don't mind tapping out to you. You could put me in the Iron Maiden backbreaker or tap me out in a crossface. He goes, we'll figure something out. So I get there, and it turns out it's a 3-on-1 handicap match with me, uh, Kevin McCleary, and Casey Brinkmeyer. And I'm the only one there wearing wrestling gear, other than Axe. And that was how I gained the nickname in the locker room, Mr. Incredible, because I took the look from a wrestler that I saw um, in an old movie, an Abbott and Costello movie. It was Abbott and Costello in the Foreign Legion, and in the opening scene, there's two wrestlers. There's Wee Willie Davis that plays Abdullah the Arabian Assassin, and Slammin' Sammy Manacker, who plays Bertram the Magnificent. Bertram the Magnificent wore black and red tights with black boots. So I'm like, I always liked that color scheme. I think I'll roll with it. And so I came out with black tights and red long tights and black boots. And that's how that color scheme got. And I'm like, oh my God, this is the worst decision of my life. So I we get there and I'm like, what are we going to do, Axe? And he goes, well, you're not taking the pile driver if you're not wanting to. So he goes, we'll just call it in the ring. And I'm like, okay, because any other match, we've always had it planned out in the back. And he's out there. I'm standing there, and I'm ready to grapple with him. And the next thing you know, he starts cutting a promo in the ring, and he's like, "This is all right. This is your big chance, kid. Don't blow it." And I said, "I don't get nervous." He goes, "You don't get nervous." Boom! Kicks me in the stomach, forearm across the back. Didn't even feel it. It is so light. It's like a dream. You feel you feel the knuckles, but you don't feel the impact.
and he
And
and he
so
and, and he looks like he's beating the hell out of you.
yeah, he does. and and then he's working me and everything, and I tag out, and then Kevin tags in, Casey tags in, come back in, we dog pile Axe in the corner. I back out, and I go to set up to throw a clothesline after they give him the um, double whip into the corner across the ring, and he comes charging out, double clothesline, and they go down. I'm like, what the? Next thing you know, I feel a boot hit me in the gut, and he's grabbed me around the wrist for a short arm lariat, Stan Hansen style.
Fuck yeah, Stan Hansen.
And I go down, and honestly, that lariat was the hardest that he hit me all night.
Really?
Yeah. And then I went, he says, come on, give me a body slam. And I'm strong as an ox. And I hook him to go up for the body slam. And I bring one of his feet off the ground. I feel him hook up on me. He's like, come on. And I'm like, okay, he's not wanting me to go up. So I'm just barely getting one foot off the floor. And he just drops me with another forearm. And then puts me in the standing arm bar, and he calls the other guys in there, and then ba boom 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 ba ba ba, and then we go to the finish. And that was basically just setting up as a squash match for whenever him and Roger Mathis had their story.
Okay.
And then on the next episode, on the next installment, I was in uh, another title match, and I was on for the tag team titles against the wrestling buddies Jay Spade and Dalton Anthony. My tag team partner was David Lee Walker. And David Lee Walker, he'd been training with us since Stridiversary of last year. And he came in and he was doing pretty good, rising up in the ranks. And then Hatton put us together. And it was honestly one of my better matches because, I mean, it wasn't necessarily a squash match. It was competitive. We got a little bit offense in, and it was a good match. I ended up taking a trifecta, which was uh, Anthony's Glasgow Kiss, super kick. No, super kick into the Glasgow Kiss headbutt into the pedigree DDT that Spade does. And that was a good match. And then let's see, what was the next one? Oh, I wrestled B-Rad twice for the Legacy title. Once at a birthday party, and then once for a private show for a handicapped assisted living home. I'll get it out. And those were always fun. And then I wrestled
Real
at.
quick, real quick sidebar. Stride is a promotion in this area that does wrestling for birthdays and private shows and things of that nature. Uh, as a wrestler, what is the difference between having to work in front of a crowd, be it for at a place like Black Diamond where there's a lot of people, or the Stride Arena, which holds a fair amount of people, but the energy brings it up, and all these different gyms that you guys go to. What's the difference between working in those crowds and then having to sort of readjust? And maybe is the right word for a birthday party crowd.
Well, it depends on the crowd that you're working in, how big into wrestling they are, stuff like that. Like my last match against Brian Richards, it was for my grandfather's 81st birthday, and it was dead. The one birthday crowd that I wrestled B-Rad for the title, it was it was electric because it was a bunch of little kids that were big wrestling fans. So, you know, big arena crowds compared from the Black Diamond show that where we had over 700 people, standing room only, and wrestling in front of 50, 60 people. It really doesn't change. It's just It's just you get the adrenaline rush being in front of a crowd, but it's depending on how electric the crowd is. That's the only difference I could see.
Okay. Um. So you mentioned you had your last match at your grandfather's birthday.
Yeah,
That had to be special, even with the dead crowd, as you said.
and it was hard enough and everything because I booked that show. I
Okay.
wrote, I booked it. I wrote the finish for every match. Um, Opening match, I wanted them because my grandfather was a competitive catch as catch can wrestler. He was a hooker, as the term is called. And I wrote in all the matches. I said I wanted to be competitive. I wanted there to be a fair amount of chain wrestling and technical wrestling going on, other than just spots. So, and I told him, I said, my granddad is a veteran of old school professional wrestling. He will sit out there and he will pick apart your match. And I booked Savion Ayers against David Lee Walker, and they did fairly good. And originally, I was going to go on second with Brian, and I was going to put Hatton and Spade in the main because I can't follow those guys. And then Hatton walks in and sees the card. He goes, "Okay, we're changing something. Zach, you're going on last." So I'm like, "Okay, it's your building." He goes, "Yeah, but it's your party and it's your grandpa." And I'm like, "Fine." And I take liberties at that and anything. I respect Heath Hatton to that extent that I would rather him go on and be able to close it out because he has the tenure, he has the experience, he knows how to work a crowd. I would want him to go and actually close out the show. And I that was the only finish that I didn't book. Who was going over was Spade and Hatton. I just wrote down. I just wrote down who's working face, who's working heel, and I told him, I said, just I don't care, flip a coin, see who's going over. And they said, well, who's working the heel? And I said, Spade is. He goes, okay, Spade, you're going over. And it was a relatively good match. But then we get to the main event, and it was me and beautiful Brian Richards. Brian went out there and cut a promo on how old everybody was in the ring and everything, and it was good. And then I'd always come out, for some reason, we did the birthday show, and I came out to Rodeo by Garth Brooks. And I made it work, but I'm like, I'm not coming out to Rodeo by Garth Brooks for this show. So I chose Whoop a Man's Ass by Trace Adkins. I that was the hardest part for me in wrestling was, I never know whenever I'm going to be working a show. I want to have the music, that's going to send a message to the crowd, convey who my character is, and also set the pace and the energy in the room. So we come out, and we had it all planned out, and then he decided to throw a couple wrenches in there that actually worked pretty good. It got sympathy from the crowd. Um, and then we went outside the ring and started working, and it was probably the best moment of my granddad's life and my family's life because he's out there taunting, and my granddad just comes straight across and punches him right in the mouth
Oh God.
with his Masonic ring on.
Oh dear.
Yeah, and it's the big kind that's got the big diamond in it.
Right.
Punched him right square in the mouth. I come up behind him and I put him in a chicken wing crossface. And I said, "Who wants some? Who wants some?" And my mom throws her hand up. She just come right across and straight up bitch slapped him across the mouth. And I called up and I said, "Come on, Grandma, I'll get you some." And my grandma weighs about 87 pounds with a rock in her pocket soaking wet. And she wears all these rings on her fingers that are all diamonds. And she just straight up hockey pucked him right in the mouth with a potato from hell. And my brother, the natural Jesse James, is sitting in the back. I said, "Come on, dude, get him." He goes, "Okay." And he comes right across and just backhand pimp slaps him across the mouth. And
Wow.
then he comes back up and he's
You
trying to
got me
get
feeling
in.
sorry for Brian right now. I just want to point that out.
And then he comes in. He's trying to get in. I hook him up and I was like, come on, Mom, get him. And I put him in an arm bar and I bend him down face first into the canvas. She just comes up and spanks him across the ass and he goes flying into the ring because she hit him extra hard.
Oh.
And we get in the ring and I'm yada, yada, yada. I get in the ring and next thing you know, he's coming up, hits me with a jawbreaker. And then he starts working me. Um, we had the hard cam there because we filmed the matches that night, and he came up and just put me on the ropes and just started raking my eyes, literally digging his fingers into my jaw and pulling my mouth open, pulling my nose, hooking my nose in a nose hook, and it hurt. I'm not gonna lie. And then I go over and I'm on the ground trying to crawl away from him and get away from him. And he comes and just rakes his nails down my back. And I'm laying across the ropes and I'm waiting for him to give me the signal. And he just comes up and just rubs me on the back and then just palm chops me in the back overhand. And I'm watching the film back and everything, and it sucked. I'm coming up and I'm like, you son of a bitch. And you could see everybody in the crowd just wincing and everything. My mom just went and she just cringed. Come up, we're working, and then I forget what we did next. And then he brought me up after he did a Bronco Buster in the corner, which he called, and I was fine with. I'm like, do whatever you want to, just don't kill me. and, and then come up and he set me up to do something. I caught him up down with the sidewalk slam, and we go for the pin. Kicks it too, and I'm like, shit. I lay down on the ground. I'm going to take this 10 count as long as I can. I'm trying to catch my breath. I'm trying to come up. What am I going to got to do to put this sucker down? Come up. We come back to the middle of the ring, and he just comes with a haymaker, and I throw a haymaker, Dusty Rhodes style haymaker, and then forearm, shoves me back, chops me, and he goes, yeah, baby. Well, then he chopped me, and I'm sick and tired of getting chopped. I've been chopped 3 times that night, and I'm like, fuck it. I turned into Jean-Claude Van Damme from Fight Club, and I just go Super Saiyan scream, and I come through, and I swing through, and I just give him the chop from hell. And he goes down, and I fire up, clothesline, double axe handle, boom, power slam, 1-2. He kicks out. And I'm looking at the referee, and I'm like, that was 3, Savion. He goes, no, it was 2, Duke. And I'm like, 3, 2, okay. By that time, Brian's going over to the corner, and I'm like, come here, Brian, you ain't so beautiful now, are you? And he totals me in the corner on the second turnbuckle. Picks me up, goes for the rock bottom, he hooks me, and I'm dazed because I just got my bell rung for a shoot on the turnbuckle. Because if anything that I took on the chin or to the head, I took it. I didn't protect myself. I took it on the chin because I wanted to make it look legitimate as possible. Which is one reason why I had to retire, because I had too many concussions. And he said, "You ready for this, Grandpa? I'm going to end his world." I come up, ripcord, stunner, 1, 2, 3, and I'm laying on the mat. The bell's rung, and I'm sitting there. I'm like, "We're done." And then I hear my grandmother say, "I finally got to see him win a match." The crowd popped off of my grandmother. Dead crowd all night long, and they pop off my grandmother.
You gotta love grandmas that way.
Oh, I love old people. They kill you.
uh,
But that was February 27th. And then I transitioned back into my referee role. and I refereed the I Quit match between Bloody Dexter and Scott Phoenix at the end of the Best of Seven series for the No Limits Championship at Stridiversary 2021.
Um, so, and I don't mean this to be insensitive, and I know it had to be hard for you to retire, but is it hard to still be able to referee? Is it hard being that close to pro wrestling and what you enjoy doing and not being able to do it, or is it still fun to just be involved with the pro wrestling business, even if it's not as a wrestler?
It's honestly, I'm a better referee than I was a wrestler because, with my style of wrestling, it didn't fit with the current product and everything. I was old school. I really wanted to have technical matches. I was first spots and everything, but flippy, uh, flippy shit, as Lou Thez called it, choreographed tumbling. That wasn't kind of my bag and everything. And I remember the day I had to retire April 1st of this year, and I went in for a physical, just a regular yearly physical, like I do. And doctor checked my heart, checked my lungs, and then he started running his finger down my back. And he said, "We need to get you in for X-rays. Something's not right." And they got me in for X-rays, and two or three of my discs went out in my lumbar section of my back, and it stems from a car wreck that I was in almost 10 years ago, 8 years ago, this November. And what happened was I had a severe lumbar sprain on my back, and I'd had physical therapy to correct it 6 times, and they haven't been able to correct it, and they wanted to do surgery. But I've seen so many people have back surgeries that I know personally that were never the same since, and I just refused to let them go in with and cut on me with a knife. And he said, "How long have you been wrestling and training?" And I said, "Since November of 2019. He said, "Your back can't take it anymore." And he said, "Well, how many bumps do you do?" And I said, "On average, maybe 30 or 40 a night training, 2 nights a week." He said, "If you keep doing that, you'll be in a wheelchair in the next 5 years, crippled, and you won't walk again." And he went and he just said, "You've got to stop." And as you said at the beginning of the program, I'm a jack of all trades. I'm a historian. I like to explore. I like to get out. I'm an outdoorsman. It's hard to do all the stuff that I love and run a cattle ranch from a wheelchair. And I've seen so many people do that, and I'm just like, if I'm able to still referee, I'm happy. But I cried that day in the truck whenever I left the hospital. And I called my fiance, and I'm just like, they said I got to quit. Because I told her, I said, I have no intention of quitting, Lord willing. And I'm still happy, to the point that I'm able to still referee. I can take a bump every now and then, but doing 30, 40 bumps a night training, was just going to speed up the process. Um, and It was hard to, it's hard whenever you get your first taste, you're hooked.
Mm-hmm.
You lace up those boots, you put those tights on, and your music hits and the crowd is going. Whether they're cheering or booing you, you're hooked. It's like a drug, and it's your fix. And it was hard to get myself weaned off of that aspect of being in the business. But um, there's a friend of mine that wrestled for the NWA in Mid South, Major Freedom, that I am very good friends with on my podcast. And he said, you might have found your calling in professional wrestling business as being a referee. And honestly, I have so much fun. And like I said, it's the best seat in the house. You're in there with two people that are going out there to entertain, put on a good show, and take people's minds off of what's going on and all the negativity in the world. So it was bittersweet, to say the least.
So, kind of making a bit of a transition, and we're definitely going to have you back and have you talk a lot more in depth about the other things that you have done and that you're a part of. But you mentioned that you have a podcast.
Hmm.
Tell us a little bit about your podcast.
Well, it's you can find it on um, you can find it on Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Pandora. We're working to get on iHeartRadio and Pandora. It's called Wrestling with Monsters, and it is for wrestlers, wrestling fans, and cryptid enthusiasts alike. And it's me, the Iron Man referee, as I call myself now, as they call me at this promotion I referee for. Major Freedom, Stacy Coughlin from Thibodaux, Louisiana, and my cousin String Bean, the wrestler. And we go and we do these podcasts. We used to do them every week and everything, but with everything going on with the weather and with the hurricane down there in Louisiana where Stacy lives, Major Freedom, we haven't been able to record. And so, but we usually release Friday nights at 7 p.m. Central Standard Time. And we have had, oh God, we have had so many guests on there already. I mean, we've had Edmund Livewire McGuire. We've had beautiful Brian Richards. We've had Bud Galloway. Cash Borden has been on. Um, and we get on and we do reviews of stride shows. And recently we did the review of Heath Hatton versus Scrap Iron Adam Pierce from All American Pro Wrestling for the NWA Heavyweight Championship. And we do a lot of things, and then we discuss some things in the paranormal and cryptozoology side on some episodes. And we don't just limit it towards wrestling. We talk everything. We talk wrestling, the business, superstars, other promotions, and then with monsters and ghosts and stuff like that. And we're actually getting ready to do what we call our world tour series, where we're going to be going around the world, not literally, figuratively, with other promotions around the world like AAA, New Japan, the UK, Germany, you know, all these places that's got all these kinds of promotions. And we're starting in New Japan as soon as we can.
Awesome. Real quick, we'll get on this, and then we'll definitely discuss this part in more long form next time you're on the show. But you've mentioned you've done some writing, you've been featured in some books as a folklorist. What what exactly would you how would you describe yourself as a folklorist? I know I saw the young lady that's a folklorist on MythBusters, but what exactly is that for those of us that don't know?
Well, I classify myself as a cryptozoologist. And cryptozoology is a pseudoscience, and it is the study of creatures that are not yet recognized and documented by science, like Bigfoot, Loch Ness Monster, Mothman, Chupacabra, extraterrestrials, stuff like that. And, I am a field researcher in that kind of stuff. I have had experiences. I've been featured actually in a documentary that was released back in February called on the creature from Big Muddy, an Illinois Bigfoot legend, and it was about the Big Muddy monster. And I've been featured on PBS with a film crew from SIU in Carbondale called Alt News 2646. And I took them out. We actually had some action that night. And I am with this is not a gimmick. This is actually a shoot. Um, I am actually the founder and the team leader of the Southern Illinois Monster Hunters, established in April of 2015. You can find us on Facebook. You can find us on YouTube. And I have been doing this stuff ever since I was 9 years old. Whenever I heard the howl of a Bigfoot, whoever's laughing, whoever's listening, They can laugh. I don't care. You know, you got to be thick skinned whenever you're in this kind of thing. It's just like it is in the uh, wrestling world where people want to say it's fake. But from what I've experienced, there are things that do go bump in the night. With every little bit of folklore and every legend, there is a little bit of truth that inspired it. That's where I come in to try and figure out, as my mentor, John Tice, trapper of Appalachian Investigators and Mysterious Sightings, says. It's our job as cryptozoologists to separate the fact from the bullshit. And so I've been doing this now in cryptozoology for 16 years. And I have gone and I have actually done investigations in Kentucky, Indiana, Missouri, North Carolina, Virginia, Ohio, West Virginia. I think I said Tennessee, and in Illinois. You know, I it's taken me everywhere, and I have spoken in front of anywhere from 400 to 1,000 people giving lectures. And I do lectures all over Southern Illinois at local libraries. People have a genuine interest in this aside from wrestling. And, you know, there's people out there that have actually experienced something. They have seen something that they can't explain, but and they're looking to, you know, have some kind of a answer to what they've experienced. Um, there's so many cases even going on right now. Um, just as recently as 2 years ago, in the mount down in the Appalachian Mountains, where down in Tennessee, North Carolina area, where that little boy went missing, and he was gone for 3 days, and it was the dead of winter, and they found him. He was not frostbit. He was healthy. He hadn't missed a meal, and he said the bear took care of me. What 3-year-old is going to go and say a Bigfoot took care of me? They're going to go and place on what they know exists to explain what they're actually experiencing and what they saw. So, you know, I am a firm believer in quote unquote modern day monsters. You know, my mother, my grandfather, my brother, every generation of my family has had encounters, including myself. But we can save that for the next show
Absolutely, we
because
will.
I will go off on a tangent on that. So I got to cut myself off.
That's fair, and well, even though we're all about tangents on this podcast, but we definitely have a lot of meat on the bone for you to come back if you're wanting to discuss a little bit more about your encounters and a little bit more about that other aspect of your life. But one more
Oh,
time,
100%.
one more time for anybody who might be interested. What's the name of your podcast and your YouTube channel?
Wrestling with Monsters, the podcast. You can go on Google and type it in, and it'll show all of the platforms that we are broadcast on and a list of all of our episodes. Um, you can find the Southern Illinois Monster Hunters both on Facebook and on YouTube. Uh, and also on that same YouTube channel, you can actually find my outdoor channel, which I started this year, and it's Duke Randall Outdoors. And like I said, I'm an outdoorsman. I love to hunt. I love to camp. I love to fish. I love to explore. And I love to travel. That's all that show is. And we did an episode where we were just night fishing out on Sandusky Lake, south of Crab Orchard.
Okay.
So it's always a lot of fun, and it's not just one thing. It covers everything in this world that I'm passionate about.
Nothing wrong with that. It's always fun to get to create content for things you're passionate about. But uh, Duke, I really appreciate you being on the show on short notice. I appreciate your story, and I hope you can recover and get one more match one day. But it's I'm glad that you're still involved in doing a lot of things you love after hearing about that. And I
Well,
wish you nothing but the best, man.
I am coming back strong and everything. I mean, I'm just now coming out of a stint of having some heart issues. Um, since August 7th, and I'm starting to come back strong. And who knows, Lord willing, I may lace up those boots again.
Well, thank you everyone for tuning into this episode. If you enjoyed, please give a like, share, subscribe for more content, not just from the world of pro wrestling, but from the world of comic books, gaming, anime, and all things geek culture. Check out Duke's channel, check out Duke's podcast, and follow me on my social media pages, facebook.com/athleticgeeka9, Twitter athletic_geeka9, Instagram athleticgeeka9, and if you'd like to contribute to this channel financially, I am on Patreon, patreon.com/athleticgeeka9. But thanks again to Duke Randall, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.